Hey guys, welcome to Guitar from Scratch, which is a series that's going to be focused on exploring the very fundamentals of the instrument and slowly progressing because I've realized that a lot of self taught students can play well, but at a certain time you reach a plateau. And until somebody tells you exactly what you can do next, it's very hard to find out your own path forward because there's just so much information on the internet, right? So, from scratch, it's just the very basics. For today, we're going to talk about a few key points. First, I want you to check when you hold the guitar for the first time. If you've never played guitar, figure out how you are comfortable. Like this, right? Or like that. So I am left-handed. That means this part of my guitar, we will learn the names of the parts too. The head of the guitar essentially, like our body, the top is the head. The head of the guitar is facing the right. If you're right-handed, it will be facing the left. There are teachers who will force left-handed students to play in a right-handed way, which is not necessarily a detrimental thing because if you're playing as a left-handed guitarist a right-handed guitar and they've taught you to play as a right-handed guitarist, your fretting hand gets stronger, while my picking hand is a little more stronger than my fretting hand because I'm left-handed. The only thing is you're going to experience a lot of discomfort in the beginning. Ideally, I would say make the choice for yourself. The only thing I'll mention is that finding left-handed guitars is quite hard, especially good ones. Okay, that's one thing you want to keep in mind. The second thing is once you know that you hold your guitar in this or that direction, right, where the headstock is pointing, you focus on the posture. As you notice, the guitar has this little curve at the bottom. So this goes onto your right thigh if you're right-handed. Okay. So if I turn my guitar around, then this little curve will be on my right now, so my left thigh. Another thing is that you notice I'm not doing anything with the fretting hand. Okay, the frets are these boxes. We will talk a little more about this. But I'm not doing anything with this hand, right? Because if you put your hand with your elbow over this little hump, right? You stabilize the guitar with just one hand. If you're right-handed, it's going to be your right hand. So you do not want to hold your guitar with this hand, alright, the one that plays the music essentially, right? So that's one thing about how you have to hold the guitar so that you're not using two hands. You want to make sure back is straight, especially if you sing while playing the guitar, so that you're able to breathe properly. And of course, good posture is going to help you in the long run, alright? Now that we've discussed that, another important point for most students is, especially if they're learning for the first time, is whether you want to start with fingerstyle or if you start with a pick. So this is what we call a pick or a plectrum. What this does is we hold it like this. So the way I describe it is, let me get the angle right. You bend your index finger, right, like this. And you place the pick on top so that the tip of the pick is facing away from your hand like this. You see? And then you put your thumb on top. So that means just a little bit of the tip of the pick is sticking out. That's it. That's how you want to hold it. Okay? So if you're using a pick, there's a lot of things you can do that fingerstyle either can't, especially the timbre, means the quality of the sound. When you're playing with the pick, right, it feels and sounds different. Now, if you play with fingerstyle, it's a little more mellow. right? So it's your choice in the beginning. Again, if you take lessons, some teachers would prefer you to start with a pick. Okay, if you're learning classical music, right, then fingerstyle is the go-to, right? We don't play classical music with our pick, right? Now, another thing I want to mention is, since we have discussed the placement of our hands, we don't want the hand that's playing on these boxes to hold it. We want to make sure the elbow is the one that's stabilizing this curve of the elbow. That's the one that's stabilizing the guitar. And you always keep your guitar either parallel or slightly above. If you see classical musicians, they hold it like this. So it's in between their legs, but most people will hold it like this. So you want to make sure it's slightly going up instead of going down. Okay. So if you feel it going down, you literally just press with the picking hand and your guitar will be lifted up. Okay. Now there's two things that are very important to remember. You will see a lot of famous and amazing guitarists use this technique with the pick. When they place the pinky here and then they play. Right? Now this is called anchoring. Like a ship has an anchor to stabilize it in one place. A lot of people learn it like that because it helps in the beginning to stabilize your fingers, right? Your hand, so it doesn't move anywhere that you don't want it to move. But what I always suggest is to never anchor. Okay, it's a personal preference, but the thing is, you can still stabilize your hand right here on the top, right here with the pinky or on the top. I just keep the base of my palm on the top and I go. So if you get the habit, right, if you get the hang of it, then you don't need anchoring. Okay, that's one important thing you want to focus on is, are you going to do anchoring? For me, it's a crutch. Like we have crutch words, right? Like when we are thinking of something, right? So same thing, a crutch here, it helps us to stabilize the hand. Literally the word crutch helps a person walk, right? Here, this helps stabilize our hand. But if you learn how to play without anchoring, then your hand will be stabilized automatically. Get the muscle memory basically, right? I don't need to anchor. That's one very important thing, okay? If you were to ask me, I would always say do not anchor. But it's a personal preference. And if you already have been playing for a long time and you're anchoring, then breaking that habit is very difficult. That's why I want to start from the very beginning, so that you know the fundamentals of why we're doing what we're doing, why is it harmful, what is beneficial, right? So that we create good habits from the beginning itself, from the start. Now, another thing is, when you're using this hand, right, the one that's playing these boxes, so your left hand, you see these muscles are the ones that are moving. It's very hard to see on the camera, but if you see closely, you see, it's the arm muscles, the forearm muscles that move. So everything you do here, right, has to be with the muscles of the forearm. If your joint hurts, right, a joint wears off, it's not a muscle. If your joint wears off, right, then it will be even hard to play. So your wrist should never hurt, okay? If your wrist hurts, shake it off, take a little break, and make sure you use the muscles in your forearm only. Once you notice that, these muscles get stronger and stronger and stronger until it doesn't hurt anymore. That's what I call stamina. You test how long you can play without having pain in the forearm. not the wrist. If you use the right technique, then the wrist doesn't come into the equation until you play specific chords, like when you have to change the position of the, like this, see, then I have to move my wrist a little bit, but that's later on. So anchoring, and then also how you use the muscles on your forearm. That's the important thing, okay? Another thing is you have to make sure that you're playing at the edge of the fret. You see, it's not at this edge, but at this edge, okay? Because that's the place where you put the least amount of pressure. You don't play on top of the metal part, metal fret here, because it's going to get muted. You play right beside it. Because if I apply the same energy but move back, notice it's muted. But if I apply the same amount of energy and pressure, it sounds out perfectly fine. So make it a habit to play at the edge, okay? You see my fingers at the edge. That's what you want to do. Another thing is, of course, when you're looking at this hand specifically, you want to make sure to start off with the classical technique of using this hand. That means you keep your thumb sideways in the middle of the neck. This is the neck of the guitar. We'll discuss the parts shortly, okay? But the neck is the back of this fretboard, the board made out of frets, right? So you keep your thumb, at the middle, so that when I'm playing, you see it's not visible. This is how you play classical music. If you want to play classical music, like that, you see. So that means classical technique is thumb at the side, and the logic for that is if you keep your thumb straight, right, like this, notice your fingers go away from the fretboard. If I tilt my thumb sideways, they come back to the fretboard, right? So you don't have to traverse all this distance, right? So this is closer. And that brings us to the next point, which is making sure that your fingers are always as near to the fretboard as possible. This was what I struggled with at the beginning. I would play. You see so much movement, especially your pinky, your little finger. But then you practice long enough consciously. That means you think about what you're doing and how to correct it. Then you'll notice minimal movement. I call this trimming the fat. Anything that's extra, right? You don't need to do that. Anchoring is extra because you can stabilize your hand without an anchor. Then moving your fingers farther away from the fretboard is also trimming the fat, right? When you bring them closer, you make it easier on yourself. By playing at the edge, you're trimming the fat as well because you're applying less pressure, basically, right? So, this is basically how you use your picking hand. The only thing I'll mention is that keep your wrist like a bit towards the downside so that your this part, the palm, doesn't touch the neck, okay? So you go like this. You don't want to do it like that. A lot of rock guitarists especially do it like this. But I would suggest keeping the wrist down, the palm not touching the neck of the guitar, because this will make sure that you are only using your fingers. This is again a crutch. If you do this, you have more support. Your palm is also pushing in. But if you do this, the only thing that supports you is the thumb at the back, and the fingers that you play are the ones that are putting the pressure. So if you practice like that, then you won't have that issue of strength. Your fingers will be strong enough because you already can do it without needing that extra, help from the wrist and the palm. Okay, so that's the placement of the right hand of a left-handed guitarist or the left hand of a right-handed guitarist, the picking hand. Parts of the guitar is pretty easy. You can look up a diagram. I'll make sure to put one on the screen right now. These are the tuning pegs because they are used to tune the guitar. And just like the body, they're divided into three parts, just like our body. The head or the headstock, the neck and the back here, this whole part is the neck, and then the body. So head, neck, body, right? So you have your tuning keys. Some people call it tuning machines or tuning pegs, but that's used to tune the guitar. You twist them to tighten or loosen the string. These are the tuning posts. Again, just good to know. You don't need to know the terminology unless you study it like in university or something like that. If you're seriously academically approaching the guitar, knowing all the parts is not important. Okay, this part, this white part on which the string rests, is called the nut, and you can get the nut changed because most guitars come with a plastic nut. So I've had my guitar changed to have a bone nut. You can get a bone nut, and above that is pearl nut. So those wear down a lot slower than the plastic ones, and they give a more vibrant sound. Okay, so this is the neck, and these boxes are the frets. That's why we call it the fretboard. It's a board made out of frets, and you can see that there are markings on it, right? So in the beginning, this is what we're going to do next time, is to learn how to read music for the guitar. This just helps you to memorize which fret is which number. So on some guitars, you have a dot at the third fret. 1, 2, 3. Mine starts at 4, 5th. So the 5th fret has a fret marker, 9th fret has a fret, 7th fret has a fret marker, 9th fret has a fret marker, and 12th has a double dot sometimes. Not all guitars do that. But this is just to help you memorize slowly the numbers of the guitars. It's a visual aid. Once you get comfortable, you don't even need to look to so you don't even need that. But for the beginning, this is what you'll use. And if you notice, most guitars have the same dots right on top here. So when you're holding a guitar like this, you're ruining your posture if you're trying to check the fret markers every time. So the guitars that have the dots on the top, you automatically can see, okay, there's a dot on the 3rd fret, 5th fret, 7th fret, 9th fret, and then 2 or sometimes 1 on the 12th. So you don't need to bend yourself essentially. I don't know if it's clear here, but these are the dots, you see. So this is the 7th fret dot, this is the 5th fret dot, so it's a visual aid. Now because my guitar is originally a right-handed guitar that was flipped upside down, and the placement of the saddle was changed and the nuts also, so I don't have these markers on top. I have them at the bottom, so they don't help me in any way. So this is our fretboard, right? Then in the body, you have the sound hole, essentially. The same thing that it says, that's what it does. It amplifies the sound. If I play behind the sound hole, it is a more mellower and muted sound. But if I play over the sound hole, it's a bit more resonant and warm. So it depends upon what kind of sound you want. You can experiment, but ultimately learn how to play over the sound hole, because that's where the amplification is the best. Okay, that's why it's called an acoustic guitar. Acoustics is the study of sound, basically bouncing off of things, and you're literally putting the sound into the sound hole, and the sound bounces off the walls and comes back out louder. Okay, that's why when you play an electric and it doesn't have a sound hole and you don't plug it in, you barely hear anything because there's no mechanism like a sound hole to amplify the sound. That's why we need an amplifier, right? So that's your parts of the guitar. The only thing left is this, right? You have the bridge, which is this wooden part. Then you have the saddle on which the strings rest, basically like a horse saddle, right? And then these are pins, bridge pins. These hold the guitar, the strings in place. And of course, everyone knows these are the strings, okay? They have a specific name. I'll keep them on the screen right now. So we number the strings from the thinnest one. That's our 1 string. Then above it is 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 is the thickest one. So from the bottom, it's E, B, G, D, A, E. It's E, high E, because the pitch is high. If you notice, there are 2 E's. So how do you differentiate between them? It's just by referring to the pitch. So high E, B, G, D, A, low E, low pitch, right? So these are the strings. So that's parts of the guitar that's covered, right? You have to choose between plectrum and fingerstyle, because if you do fingerstyle, then the same muscles will be engaged as with this hand, right? So it's a little more tricky, okay? Again, it will hurt, right, in the beginning. But after a while, you develop these calluses on your fingertips that make it hard. So I can play the whole day, right, in my classes, and I have no problem with pain in my fingertips, right? My forearm might get tired, right, muscular tiredness, but with the fingertips, there's no pain at all, right? And so that's why you want to make sure that you play at the edge of the fret so that you do not put too much pressure and have it hurt that much, okay? So another thing, just to end with, is to make sure to play with the fingertip of your finger. You notice this bridge shape. You don't want your notes to be like this. You want them to be like this bridge shape, and play always with the fingertip. I have noticed lots of people do it like this. So they play with this whole part, but you want the fingertip only, you see? Only the fingertip. Wrist is not touching the neck. Fingers at the edge of the fret, right? And now that we've discussed basically the parts of the guitar, the names of the strings, your posture, what muscles you should use, if it hurts too much, take a break and come back later, because you do not want to play through the pain. If you form bad habits, right, it's very hard to break them. When you play through the pain, right, your technique is not at its best. So you might be falling down that, rabbit hole of creating unhealthy habits. So try to remember these few things, all right? So I'll reiterate, right? We learned about how to hold the guitar, make sure you're left-handed or right-handed. We learned about how to place and hold the guitar, right? Our fretting hand on the fretboard should not be holding the guitar, just the picking hand. Then you choose between fingerstyle and using the pick, right? Even if you start with the pick, you can change to fingerstyle. Even if you start with fingerstyle, you can still learn how to play with the picks. That doesn't matter. But if you're just starting off, you have to make a choice ultimately, right? And then you make sure that your fingers are at the edge of the guitar, right? You're playing with the fingertip. You keep them as close to the fretboard as possible. So they take the path of least resistance essentially, because if you keep them here, to play a note, your hand has to travel a long way. But if I'm keeping it here, then it's not traveling that much. And of course, one thing is you have to play consciously. So if you're doing anchoring, you have to notice that you're anchoring and remove it, because you want to trim the excess, trim the fat, and make sure that you do not do anything that harms you in the long run. Alright? Because guitar ultimately is an instrument it's not very difficult to learn, but there is pain, of course, and it's also very easy to get it wrong. And if you get it wrong, it can cause a lot of issues in the future, right? So that's why it's important for you to focus on technique right from the beginning. Then we discuss the parts of the guitar: head, stalk, neck, and body, right? The sub parts, again, you can focus on them with the diagram. Okay. So next class we'll just talk about how to tune the guitar. We'll talk about the notes themselves. This is going to be the main focus of the next video. Basically, all you have to remember for now is the names of the strings of the guitar, because that is what helps you to tune it. Everything else, like the parts of the guitar, is not really necessary, and the technical aspects are just to play at the edge, play with the fingertip, make sure your thumb is in the middle of the neck, right, of the guitar, and make sure your fingers are close by, right? These are just no-brainers, okay? So, I think we've covered mostly what you want to know as a beginner especially, right? If you apply these things, trust me, even if it's hard in the beginning, it's going to be very, very useful in the long run. And again, do not play through the pain, okay? Pain is a very important aspect of playing the guitar, because you're playing on metal strings. And if you're playing through the pain, right, it's going to, like I said, make your technique a little more rusty, okay? And it's going to create habits that are going to, harm you in the long run. And secondly, when it hurts, you want to let it heal for a bit. That's how we develop our muscles. But ultimately, once you build the calluses up, right, you're not going to have pain anymore. So, thank you guys for being here, for watching Guitar from Scratch, and I really hope I see you again next class, where we'll discuss a little bit more about the notes. Okay? And remember, we're taking it slow so that we understand the system from the beginning. We want to know the A to Z of the guitar. We don't want to skip one part and think that it's okay, right? We want to have an answer of why are we doing this thing. Because if somebody tells you, do it like that, but doesn't explain why, then it's not a useful thing for you, right? You don't know why you're doing it. You're just being told to. So in these lessons, I will try my best to explain why we're doing something, so that you yourself understand, okay, I should be doing this because this is helping. Like no anchoring, placing your fingers at the edge of the fret, placing your fingers close to the fretboard, right? These things, if you keep them in mind, then it will make it a lot easier in the long run. Okay, so I'll see you in the next episode of Guitar from Scratch. Take care and have a nice day or night. Bye-bye.